Hello and welcome to the new video. If you have any questions about the video, leave a comment below. So, Forbidden Rite in 3.22 is still a strong build, even if you cannot afford a mageblood. Of course, there's gonna be some problems that this build is actually run on a mageblood, because the mageblood fixes a lot of problems and makes this build even stronger. But yes, you can still create a decent custom create, do like all of the content and still be a fast zoomy character without a mageblood. But eventually, you know, when you're gonna be farming with this build, you can actually get yourself a mageblood, because this build is capable of like very fast farming of the maps and doing all type of a kind of content that you would like, you know, for a build to do. And here's some information for the more casual people. This build is considered expensive. If you don't see in your inventory about 45 divines or more, and you don't have like a build that you're actually farming at T60 maps to make more currency, I would say do not start it, because you know the custom create builds are not budget friendly, they are not league started friendly, they are not easy to level. Those builds are considered more like a end game, when you actually have like a character, a decent character, and you have some kind of currency. Otherwise you're just gonna have a lot of problems. Because I did earn most of my currency when I started my occultist and I was playing Aracali Fang, and I started from a 1 divine budget, and eventually I did work up to like a squire, and after that I had about 20 mils, and okay, that build is powerful enough to farm me more and more currency, and I was starting to buying like bits and pieces. For example, I bought myself like the Stampede, then I bought myself a shield, and I started collecting all of my items from my custom crate, and eventually I already had like an occultist level 95, and I just respec my occultist from the Aracali Fang into a custom crate, and I already had all of the items, and just sold my squire to buy myself like a claw and other bits and pieces. So that's how I started my custom crate. So if you never played, or you're trying maybe getting into the custom crate, Forbidden Rite is gonna be a perfect starting point for you. Or you may be wondering if the custom crate Forbidden Rite is still strong without a mageblood, and the answer is yes. This is still a great build without a mageblood, and you can just run through the content like a truck. So if you're wondering how the build is doing in the league type content, I would say even if we are a melee character and we're using the cyclone, the Forbidden Rite has like a lot of projectiles, and they're gonna be automatically aiming on the enemies. So it's not so bad and it's not so great. I would say it's quite okay doing the Forbidden Rite build on the league content. And my tactic is mainly just to like fight the enemies, the NPCs, and I let my warriors to like drain the totems, and that's pretty much what I do. Occasionally, even in this clip, you're gonna see I was thinking, okay, it's very safe, I can start draining the totem, and I'm just gonna get one shot by some kind of crazy wielding mace lady. At least on the positive side, they added the counter like when I'm gonna respawn. That's like the positive thing of the recent patches with the league content. So now you can just enjoy a couple clips me randomly killing stuff that was able to get some Kirak mission maps and so on. But check out the next clip when I'm gonna be doing the 100% delirium, because that's what the challenge requires in this league. So this is a map, there's a challenge when you have to do 100% delirium map witnessed by Maven. They have to be 4 different sextants, they have to be 4 gilded scarabs. So you can see how did the the build performs on those like very hard delirium maps, because sometimes I do get questions how the build perform on the hard delirium maps, so it's a good opportunity to see how the build performs, and I'm gonna be doing the challenge along the way as well.
What a mysterious presence.
Impossible! How? This isn't over. This will never be over. I will unify humanity.
Less real and grasp your mortality tightly. Brother or strangle. The void protects its children. Grip of the infinite. Resist the assault! Dragon or strangle. A veil of safety and security. Grasp your mortality tightly. Tight tethers! Grasp your mortality tightly. The void protects its children. Grasp your mortality tightly. Grip of the infinite. Resist the assault! What a delightfully unusual struggle.
For the bandit choice, we're gonna be choosing to help Alira. Pantheon choice. For the minor god, I'm using Soul of Abberath because I need to deal with the ignite and I'm doing the red altars, so the burning ground is quite annoying and this pretty much solves my problem. This is not like a 100% ignite proof, but it really helps me out and I don't feel like the ignite is a big of a problem for me. Then for the major god, I'm using Soul of the Brine King, and I'm using everything from this, what the Brine King provides. I'm using the freeze, the chill, and I'm getting the remaining chill on my ring over here, so that gives me 100% to not be chilled. I mean, you're still gonna get chilled, but the chill is gonna be 0%, so it won't be affecting you like one mapping. And I cannot be frozen. The increased stun block recovery is great, and the main part, you cannot be stunned. I mean, this is not like an ideal situation how to provide yourself a stun immunity on a cyclone build, because ideally you would want to have a skin of the lords with the unwavering stance. But if you go on a trade and you try to find yourself 3 greens, 3 blue, and you try to get yourself an unwavering stance to get like a permanent stun immunity, either they do not exist on the trade or every now and then they're gonna pop out and they cost 25 divines or more. So I'm like, you know what, that's a little bit too expensive, and so that's why I'm using the Soul of Brine King. If this is not like a perfect solution for the stun, because what's gonna happen is you're gonna be cycloning and you're just gonna stop for a second and then you're gonna be cycling again. You might not even notice that while you're gonna be mapping. When I'm noticing that I do get like those micro stuns when I'm doing the league content, but otherwise I would say it's not such a bad choice, given the price of the skin of the lords. Oh, this is gonna be really complicated because I'm using a lot of tattoos, as you might see. I do not have any strength node or any int nodes. I did replace them with all of the tattoos, right? So first let's start with the watcher side. So the Watcher's Eye have two mods. The Discipline mod, when you when you gain energy shield when you hit enemy while affected by the Discipline, and then you have the Determination mod when you take the reduced damage from critical strike, right? So depending, right, and let me just say like this, the critical node, I mean from the Watcher's side, should take priority as a first thing when you're gonna be buying. You can ignore the Discipline mod for now. Later on you should just buy yourself a double stack like me, right? But depending what kind of percentage you're gonna get, let's say in my example I have 55 and I'm just I have those 10% nodes over here on the passive sheet just to get about 95. So I have 4 nodes over here and then 55 over here. That gives me a reduction of 95. Right, speaking on the Watcher side, the Discipline mod can be bought later on. Normally I would tell you this takes the priority number 1, but since the 10% instant leech is so good over here that we can actually ignore the Discipline mod for now, but later on you wanna have to buy yourself a Watcher's Eye like that. Another thing that you have to take in the, you might be having a trouble, is this: you need to have this mastery plus 3 critical support gems, because this is gonna give you levels to your awaken custom crit gem, because you need the cooldowns from this gem, as we very heavily need the cooldown reduction. That's why you need the plus 3 over here. Right, another thing is you're pretty much gonna have to buy the same amount, the same cluster jewels as me, because I'm stacking a lot of increased attack speed, such as from the Unholy Grace, from Eye to Eye and repeaters. I have a combination of 3 of them, 2 of them over here, and there's another one over here. I'm just using 1 cluster for the crits, and when you're gonna be buying the clusters or you're gonna be making yourself, make sure to put as many like stats, resistance, anything that you can get, because you're gonna run into like a resistance problem, maybe stats. So whenever you're buying something like a cluster, look for some kind of resistance or maybe stats, whatever, and just use the Exalted Orb to get something additional. Because I have like bunch of like here and stats, I have lightning resistant and more stats over here. So that's something that you have to remember. Another thing, you might overlook this small cluster jewel over here. I have a lot of stats on it, some resistance. The mana is not that important, but I have a 3-pointer over here. So the increased reservation, I have 2 points over here, and determination. If you're gonna have only 2-pointer over here, you will run into a mana issue. You won't be able to reserve all of the auras, so that's very important over here. This one is just a great addition, because we're gonna be generating endurance charges, since we are hitting ourselves all the time because of this mastery over here. This just pretty much says that we have permanently endurance charges, and they're gonna give us a little bit resistance, but I wouldn't be counting on that resistance in your POB. They are something like an additional, and they give you a fizz reduction. Right, moving on to the Militant Fate. In the Militant Fate, reduced mana cost takes like a number 1 priority, so you need to buy it with like a priority number 1, and the resistance are, you know, gonna help you out greatly. And you want to socket your Militant Fate over here so you can get some nodes. Then you want to click the mastery over here for the reduced mana cost, as this is very important, because we're gonna be reducing the mana by a lot. Otherwise you won't be able to cast your Forbidden Rite, because you will run out of the mana. Then you want to buy yourself like the trade-off orb, a large one with the negative elemental resistance as low as you can, you know, depending on your budget. And important is we taking those 3 nodes over here: Divine Shield, Glancing Blow, and Light of Divinity. You're gonna be needing the Light of Divinity not just for the like some spell damage, simply for the stats, because you're gonna be reducing the stats by the tattoos. So that's why this is very important. And the rest of it is follows very generic, tree. Like we do get some mana reservation over here, crits, blocks, pretty much standard stuff for any custom crit. If you're wondering why do I have a 10 dexterity note over here, because I'm missing 4 dexterity for now, so probably later on I'm gonna fix it with my ring, but for now I need to have this dexterity note. In case you can fix it just when you're gonna be recreating the build, what I would do simply respect this 10 dexterity note, and I would just spend it in the last mastery for the 10% physical damage from hits as a chaos damage. So I'm just gonna hover over all of the passives so you can see what I'm clicking, what kind of masteries I'm taking, and after I'm done with overviewing the tree, I'm gonna talk about some things that I'm doing with my passive tree. Right, the flask in these builds are very important. So your main priority as a flask should be something like this. You need to have a diamond flask with the mod chance to gain flask charges when you deal critical strike, and the reduced mana cost of skills during the effect. And this flask should be the only flask out of all of your flasks that has the critical strike chance mod, as you wanna up time, and you wanna have permanently up this flask no matter what, because you need the crit, the 100% from the diamond flask, and you need the mana cost. That's why you need to only have this mod on this flask and uphold it all the time. If you start putting the mods on other flask, you will have the mana issue because you won't be sustaining the charges on your diamond flask. The second important flask is the Dying Sun, and you just wanna craft yourself from the bench, hit rare unique enemies. It provides us with 2 additional projectiles that gives us a lot of damage, and we only need on the rare enemies. The next important flask is a Granite Flask, and you can roll yourself the gain charges with a hit by enemy and have an increased armor on it. This is just gonna give you a more defense. And the last 2 are like quite flexible, but I would say stick to the same flask as I have. So you have the same mod, the gain charges, reduce cures effect, as whenever you're gonna be running some kind of cures maps like temporal chain or other stuff, the cure system might be a bit annoying, and we wanna use the resistance flask for 2 reasons. One, they consume the less amount of charges, so it's very easy to sustain them, and they're gonna provide it with less damage. For example, I have a Topaz and I have a Sapphire over here, and I have a bleeding immunity. there is a possibility that you could actually replace, let's say, the Topaz Flask with the Basalt Flask that will give you a bit more armor. But the Basalt Flask requires a lot of charges, and if you gonna craft yourself like the cures reduction on the Basalt, there might be a possibility that you're gonna be running some kind of maps and you're not gonna be getting the cures reduction from your flask all the time, and that might be a little bit annoying. So I would just stick with the 2 resistant flask. But like I said, the Basalt Flask is a possibility if you choose to. So this is a core piece of the build, and this amulet was introduced in 3.22. We're gonna be using pretty much all of the stats, because the +3 Forbidden Rite are absolutely great. We're just getting more power, resistance are great, reservation is okay, but if you just have to pay a little bit more, or like you're gonna pay too much for the couple more percentage, I would just ignore. But the item and gem reduce attribute is very important, and you wanna keep it at 50%, because you're gonna run into the issue. Because what does that last stat does is pretty much lowers the requirement on all your gem and your items. As you can see, my determination requires me 159 strength, but I don't have it because I'm missing 11, but I can still use it because of this amulet. And the second thing is, with the amulet we can tattoo all of the passive tree with like the global defense and the reduced critical strike damage, and you can play around with the other tattoos as you like, but I just used the global defense one on all of my tree. And then anoint myself the infuse, that's the power charge over here. Instead of going all the way over here, I just have a anointed the power charge, and I use it the 20 catalyst for the attribute. You can use the resistance one, but that's gonna cost you a quite chunk of currency, but that choice becomes up to you. So as a weapon, we're gonna be using the Gemini Claw as a base type, because we need the grants 14 mana per hit. The life means nothing for us because we are energy shield build, and we cannot convert in any other way this life to energy shield. So it's pretty much the implicity goes only on the 14 mana per hit. Right, and let me just say like this: if you're not a confident crafter and you don't know how to craft it yourself, even if there's like, you know, bunch of videos how to actually craft it, that's how I did learn myself how to craft it. If you type in the YouTube something like Path of Exile, Forbidden Rite, Claw crafting, you will get like bunch of videos. But I will say like this: if you're not a confident crafter, let me say again, just go on a trade and buy it. If you can get it for 10 divines or less, I would just buy it. I bought myself this one for 10 divines, and I didn't want to bother myself like with the crafting, because I did about 3 sessions in the Craft of Exile. That's like a simulation tool for the crafting. If you never use that, I'm gonna leave a link in the description. And on the 3 times, the first time it took me about 6.5 divines to craft this claw. The second one was about more than 10, I think was 10.5, and the third time took me about 8. So I'm like, you know what, if I pay 10 and I'm gonna be safe, this is way better instead of, you know, gambling or taking some kind of risk, because you might save up about 4 divines, or you might lose them, or you might be just even. So I would say if you can buy something like this for 10 divine, don't just buy it. So the gems that you're gonna be keeping in your clothes is gonna be Defiance Banner, Molten Shell, and Tempest Shield. You don't need the quality on the Tempest Shield, as long as they're level 21. That's gonna be great. I mean, for the shield, I mean, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say in here. This is absolutely a great shield for the build, and you should absolutely buy it because it gives us shit ton of defense and other stats. So I mean, there's nothing that you should be replacing the eggs. This is like a #1 shield for this build, and you should absolutely buy it. So just go and buy it. And the gems that you're gonna be keeping in your shield, it's gonna be Whirlwind Blade, faster attack, Frostblink. And here comes a little bit of a tricky part, that's our rings. So one of the rings should be a synthesized base with -3 total mana cost, and this is very important because our cyclone cost us 4 mana because we have -3 total mana cost. It means it will remove 3 mana from every single skill. But once you pop your diamond flask, sorry, this one, so the cyclone costs us 0. That's why this implicit is very important. I have an additional cold resistance. I mean, you can buy with the resistance as well if you want, but that's probably gonna cost you a bit more. And then you wanna pack as much as resistance on this ring as you can. And as usual, you need to have like a open prefix for the non-channeling skills. So the more resistance you can get on this ring, then it's gonna relax your resistance on other items. Otherwise you might run into resistance issues. To make sure to pack as much as resistance as you can on this ring. This is very important. Right, so moving on to the next ring. And this is gonna be a very expensive ring because I paid 2 divines for the fractured non-channeling. And why? Because I need to have an open suffix, because I need to craft myself from the bench reduce effect on chill on you. This ring, the bench mod and the Pantheon from the Brine King give me 100%, so the chilling ground no longer affects me. And then what I would do, and I'm eventually gonna recraft this ring because I need a huge amount of strength from my ring, and I would need all attribute instead of the intelligence that I have. And then if I had like a T1 attribute, I think, then I could respec this 10 dexterity node over here. That's why I have a dexterity node over here, because I'm missing some dexterity. And then, you know, if you get some kind of plus maximum energy shield on any other useful stats, probably that would be good. But your 2 rings should follow something like this. Right, so this belt was crafted by me. So what I did is I bought myself a crystal belt, high item level, then I used it for defense catalyst. How do I call it? I think I have one. Let me just see. Yeah, the tempering catalyst. I used it for 4 of them on a white item, and then I was spamming. I don't remember exactly. Maybe it was like Alk or Scours until I got like a huge amount of strength. Then I got myself like a good resistance that I could change eventually, and I want to have some kind of 2 prefixes, not maybe the greatest, but some prefixes. I wanted to have an open suffix, and then I wanted to block another prefix, and then what I did, I slammed the Crusader Exalted Orb just to have a chance to get the cooldown reduction, because the cooldown reduction is very important on the belt. In case you won't get your cooldown reduction by slamming the Crusader Exalted Orb like me, then you're just gonna have a good crafting base, and you're just gonna have to get something like a 1 resistance, maybe some stats, and the cooldown reduction. The cooldown reduction is like a #1 priority. Unless you can find something good on the trade, or even better, then simply just buy it instead of crafting it. So for the body armor, I'm using Skin of the Lords, and the keystone passive I would really like to have is the Unwavering Stance. This will give me a good solution for the stun, but unfortunately there's none on the trade on the time of the recording of the video. So for now I'm just using a Wicked Word. But there is couple passive, I mean the keystones, that gonna be affecting your build. So I'm just gonna show you which one you should be aiming for. Our top priority is, you know, Unwavering Stance, because you're gonna give you cannot be stunned. But other good combination would be either get yourself a Divine Shield. This would just save you up a point, maybe a glancing blow, again it's gonna save you a point. Wicked Ward is not the greatest, but it's not so bad, so I would just stick with those three. If you cannot get yourself there, you cannot be stunned. And the links that I'm using a Cyclone, Awaken, Cast and Crit. Awaken, Cast and Crit is very, very important because you're getting a lot of cooldown reduction from this gem. That's why you need to have Awaken one. Then I'm using Forbidden Rite. I'm using increased critical strike chance, power charge on critical strike support, and I'm using Awaken Void Manipulation. In case for some reason the free green and free blue Skin of the Lords goes up in the price, there is like a replacement. Let's say you could go 4 blues and get yourself a crit damage over here, or you can go 1 red and just get yourself an Empower. So that's like some kind of solution for you if, like, you know, the Skin of the Lord just goes up in the price. So for the Skin of the Lords there are 2 flexible options. First one, we can use a Tabula Rasa +1. The +1 is very important. Just remember, if you're gonna be using a Tabula Rasa, you're gonna lose a lot of energy shield. The second one is like Skin of the Loyal. This is a bit cheaper than Skin of the Lords. Of course, it might go up and down in the price, but those are your two options that you can replace the Skin of the Lords. So the boots that I'm using the Stampede, and if you ever watch any of my custom crit builds, you probably were aware of it. Why do I like those boots? But if this is your first time watching my build guide, I simply like those boots because they will never slow you down when you're cycling. So that's why, the main reason why I do really like them. And another thing is, we never have, or we don't need to have a movement flask, like a Quicksilver flask somewhere, because those boots cap us at 150% of the base value of our movement speed, and you cannot increase it with any other sources such as like a Quicksilver, Onslaught, nothing like that. So this is actually quite good for us, because we always have the same speed on the Cyclone, but we cannot increase it. So there's like a positive and a negative, but mostly it's like a very positive thing. Another thing is that those boots provide us with additional way to anoint our boots. So I'm anointing a big node for the int, and I'm just using tattoos to get additional power charge. That's why those boots are very, very good. And the links that I'm using in those boots is Custom Crit, Culling Strike, Despair, and Reckoning. So what's happening whenever we block, the Reckoning is triggered, and whenever the Reckoning gets a crit, we just cast Despair for us, and occasionally we'll just proc the Culling Strike as well. So in what situation should you replace the Stampede? I would say pretty much never. Unless you're one of those people who are lucky enough to buy yourself a mageblood, and a mageblood this league actually costs roughly around 1 mirror. As the time of recording, the mirror is about roughly 400 divines. So if you can afford that, you probably can afford a better pair of boots. But if you cannot afford a mageblood, you should be sticking with the Stampede. Those pair of boots are absolutely great for a very low price. The helmet that I'm using is like a classic double influence helmet, plus maximum charge, power charge, negative chaos resistance, and I have the Forbidden Rite, additional fires, additional projectiles. Nothing too crazy in the helmet. Probably at some point I might start crafting another one and get a bit better helmet. And the gems that I'm using in the helmet is like Determination, Zealotry, Discipline, and Lighten. If you run into like maybe resistance issue, you could replace the Zealotry with the Purity of Elements. That's what I was doing for the most of the part of the video. I was using the Purity of Elements until I could get myself a little bit more currency and craft a little bit better gear, so I could then I'll swap from my Purity of Elements to a Zealotry. So the Purity of Elements is like a possibility if you just gonna be starting the build. So here's an alternative helmet that I would use if I didn't have the currency. I would use the Crown of Inward Eye with the Lab enchantment for the Forbidden Rite. But eventually you have to transition into a double influence helmet, because roughly I think you lose about 2.5 to 3 mils, so that's quite a good chunk. But you know, the Crown of Inward Eye costs like very little amount of currency. And for the gloves that I'm using, when I was buying them, I was looking for like a high dexterity, some increased attack speed, some kind of resistance, and I wanted to be like a very basic rares, because I wanted to apply the implicit chance to unnerve enemies. And the other one is like whatever you want, because there's like some kind of like increased mark effect that might be a little bit useful. You might just get a tiny bit of a damage. I'm using the maim just for the just to slow the enemies. And actually I'm crafting myself a second pair of gloves, a better one, because I bought myself a fracturate sorcerer's gloves with like a T1 dexterity, and I'm gonna be using the Essence of Zeal until I get like a high increase attack speed. I'm gonna have a fracturate dexterity. I'm gonna look for some kind of resistance and a high amount of energy shield. While I'm doing that, because I want to respect this 10 dexterity note over here. And the gems that I'm using in my gloves, it's Mark on Hit, Assassin's Mark, and I'm using Inspiration, and I'm using Enhance. Once my Flask is up, let me just put the Flask on. The Assassin Mark cost me only 5 mana. If you're gonna get yourself a Divergent Inspiration, this is gonna take your Assassin Mark to 0. Otherwise, it's just gonna cost you 5 mana. It's not of a big of a deal. 5 mana is nothing for us. So you're probably gonna be asking yourself, how did I level up the character? Actually, this character was respect from my original Arakali Fang build. And as soon as I had all of my currency, I did transition into the custom crit. If you wanna see how did I level up, go to my YouTube channel, and there should be Arakali Fang video, and there should be a POB for the one divine that I was using, and I was leveling. I was leveling with the Arakali Fang until about 94 or 5, until I could and have enough currency to transition into the custom crit. So that was my way of leveling this build. So you click on the mana problem, and you're probably cycloning, and the Forbidden Rite doesn't go off, and you're gonna be like, hey, mana problem. That's usually most of the custom crit. So let me explain how we reduce our mana cost on my build. First, the Flask is permanently up. You need to have it, right? So the Flask is the first step. The second one, I have a fracturate non-channeling skill, -6. Another ring is -7 non-channeling, and I have an implicit -3 total mana cost. This is very important. It's -3 total mana cost. Then I have a reduced cost 10% over here. Then I have from my Militant Fate another, I think 7 or 8, and combination of this passive, the Militant Fate, Flask, 2 rings including the implicit, and when I have a Gemini Claw that I can hit all the time with my Cyclone, I have no mana issues. If you're interested in what kind of Atlas passive strategy or whatever you want to call it I'm using, I'm sticking to like, you know, what I like to really do. So I'm running Blights because I absolutely love Blights. I'm running Essence because I need the Essence for the craft, because I'm gonna be crafting some items, and I'm running Bestiary because I like Bestiary because it just adds a bit more rare monsters to the map, and that's pretty much my tactic. But you know, you don't have to absolutely use the same tactic that I'm using. This is something to show you what actually am running on my maps. There are two map modifiers that you should be dodging or not running the maps at all. The first one is a cooldown reduction. This is just gonna mess up with your damage by a lot, like, you know, sometimes they even splitting the damage in half. So when you see a cooldown reduction, you should just, you know, re-roll the map or ignore the map for now, unless it's just like a Kirak mission, you know, when you just go there, just pick up the stack of divination card and move on. But this mod is absolutely bad for us. And another one is elemental reflect. Even if you're not hitting it with the elemental damage, the problem becomes this, like the Tempest shield has like a decent chunk amount of lightning damage, and since we are scaling a lot of generic damage, this gets multiplied, and pretty much the Tempest shield is gonna kill you. And the Molten Shell will kill you as well. So those two skills and the Frostblink just, you know, might kill you. So elemental damage and the cooldown reductions are a big no-no for the build. This is the 3 tattoos I'm gonna be explaining why do I use them. The first one is the minor one, and it's just simply reduce the critical damage that you're gonna be receiving. With the combination of your Watcher's Eye over here, you're trying to get as close to about 90 to 95, ideally 100%. The second one is global defense. If you don't know how the global defense works, it scales armor, evasion, and energy shield. In this build, I'm actually using armor and energy shield, so the global defense is like absolutely great. But of course, you're gonna be sacrificing a lot of like int and strength and dexterity nodes. I did talk about a little bit that in the ring section, so you can go over there. The last one that I'm using is a notable one that gives me +1 maximum power charge, and the lightning resistance is like, okay, it's fine, why not? This, like, hands down is like the best notable that you can have. I did play around with those unique tattoos whenever, like, there's like a conditional one for the strength. Whenever we are the presence of the unique enemy and we get crit, we're gonna summon one of those warriors. But I would say there are fun additional, and you could sacrifice one of the global defense, like one over here, and just have it. But the cooldown is like about, I think it's 63 seconds, and it lasts about 15 seconds, that warrior, and it provides you with, like, you know, I think it's like a juggernaut passive. But I would say the cooldown is too long, and you're only gonna get this on like a mapping scenario on the last map boss, so I think it's not worth it. And there's like a new tattoo when you can, I think, switch the keystone or whatever. Since the tattoo is too expensive because it costs 1 divine, it's hard for me to, like, you know, justify to spending 1 divine just to play around with the tattoo and recommend this in the video. You're gonna be wondering why my Forbidden Rite looks a little bit different. I'm using a Celestial Cat Forbidden Rite effect. I would really appreciate if you can hit the like button and subscribe button, as this will really help me out growing the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later in my next video.